Welcome to History Love, where we explore the stories, people, and events that shaped our world. Let's dive into the past and uncover history's most fascinating moments. The dream that shook an empire, the rise of Xiuquan. In the fading glow of the 19th century, China was a nation teetering on the brink of collapse. The once mighty Qing Dynasty was reeling from a storm of misfortunes, crippling famines, devastating floods, and a relentless foreign onslaught that bled the empire dry. The humiliation of the First Opium War still lingered like a wound that refused to heal, as opium poured into the country, poisoning not just bodies but the very foundation of the economy. The rich grew richer, the poor starved, and entire villages emptied as peasants abandoned their ancestral lands, driven by desperation. Amid this turmoil, whispers of rebellion echoed across the land. Secret societies and bandit groups flourished, their blades honed for the inevitable uprising. But no one, neither Qing officials nor foreign merchants, could have predicted that the most dangerous force to rise from this chaos would be an obscure failed scholar from a small Hakka village in Guangdong. His name was Hong Huoxiu. For years, Hong had dreamed of a respectable life as a scholar official, a position that would grant him honor, stability, and a future beyond the backbreaking toil of the countryside. But the imperial exams, the gateway to such prestige, proved an insurmountable barrier. 3 times he tried. 3 times he failed. With each failure, his dreams unraveled, and his mind darkened with despair. Then came the fever. In 1837, after his third disastrous attempt at the exams, Hong was stricken by a strange and violent illness. He raved, he trembled, and then in his delirium, he saw something extraordinary. He found himself in a celestial realm, unlike anything he had known. There, a majestic figure, his heavenly father, spoke to him with authority and sorrow. Men had lost their way, worshipping false idols and demons instead of the true divine power. Even Confucius, the revered sage, was punished before Hong's eyes for leading the people astray. Hong's very name was declared unworthy, and in its place the heavens bestowed a new one, Hong Xiuquan. The vision was powerful but puzzling. And for 6 long years Hong kept it locked away in the recesses of his mind. Then in 1843, after failing the imperial exam for the 4th and final time, fate intervened. A visit from his cousin led Hong back to a stack of Christian pamphlets he had received years earlier but never truly studied. This time as he read, clarity struck like lightning. His vision had not been a mere fever dream, it had been a divine revelation. He was not just any man. He was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, chosen by God to rid the world of demons. And the greatest demon of all? The Qing Dynasty. With this newfound conviction, Hong Xiuquan ignited a movement that would shake China to its core, leading to one of the deadliest uprisings in human history, the Taiping Rebellion. Little did the Qing rulers know that their most formidable enemy was no warlord, no foreign army, but a man who had once merely dreamed of passing an exam. The Divine Revolution, how faith became a weapon. By 1847, Hong Xiuquan had fully embraced his divine calling, but he knew that faith alone wouldn't be enough to overthrow an empire. He needed structure, strategy, and guidance. With this in mind, he traveled to Guangzhou, seeking wisdom from Issachar J. Cox Roberts, an American Baptist missionary. But Roberts saw something unsettling in Hong. The man's eyes burned with conviction, not just for salvation but for something far more ambitious, revolution. When Hong asked to be baptized, Roberts refused. To him, Hong and his followers were not just misguided converts. They were radicals who saw religion as a tool for political upheaval. Bent on making their burlesque religious pretensions serve their political purpose, Roberts would later write, distancing himself from the storm that was about to engulf China. But Hong Xiuquan didn't need foreign approval. He already had his first disciple, Feng Yunshan. While Hong preached across Guangxi, spreading his revelations, Feng established what would become the beating heart of the rebellion, the God-worshipping society. It was no ordinary religious sect. Hong's teachings fused Christian theology with elements of Taoism, Confucianism, and ancient millenarian beliefs. He framed it not as something new, but as a return to the pure faith of Shangdi, the supreme god of ancient China. To his followers, the Qing emperor was not just an earthly ruler but a demon who had corrupted the world. And they were the chosen ones, the holy warriors who would restore the divine order. At first, the movement gained momentum by doing what the Qing government failed to, crushing banditry and piracy in southern China. Villages once plagued by lawlessness now found protection under the god worshippers. But such defiance did not go unnoticed. The imperial authorities soon struck back, and when they did, the movement transformed from a religious awakening into a full-fledged rebellion. Guerrilla warfare spread like wildfire. Armed with faith and a growing army, Hong's forces proved resilient, and soon, others claimed divine authority as well. Yang Xiuqing, a charismatic former charcoal vendor, declared that he could speak as the very voice of God the Father. Meanwhile, Xiao Chaogui proclaimed himself the mouthpiece of Jesus Christ. The celestial family was growing. What had begun as the visions of one failed scholar now threatened to shake the very foundations of China. The stage was set for one of the bloodiest civil wars in history, the Taiping Rebellion. The question was no longer whether Hong Xiuquan was a prophet. The question was whether he could build a kingdom that would rival the Qing Dynasty itself. And the world was about to find out. The kingdom of heaven rises, the Taiping Rebellion ignites. It began with fire and faith. By the dawn of 1851, China stood on the precipice of chaos. In the rugged hills of Guangxi, imperial officials had finally grown weary of the God-worshipping society, a movement they saw as dangerous, heretical, and all too organized. But when they tried to stamp it out, they unleashed something far worse than they had imagined. The crackdown sparked war. Hong Xiuquan, now fully embracing his divine destiny, was no longer just a preacher. He was a warlord, a revolutionary, a king in waiting. His followers, now numbering 10,000 strong, were no longer just believers, they were soldiers. On January 11, 1851, Hong made his boldest move yet. Standing before his army, he declared himself the heavenly king of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, a direct challenge to the Qing Emperor himself. It was no longer just a rebellion. It was a war for China's soul. The Taiping's on the march. The Qing Dynasty moved swiftly, sending the Green Standard Army to crush the uprising. But the Taipings, led by Feng Yunshan and Wei Changhui, routed the imperial forces at Jintian. The world's largest empire had just suffered its first major defeat at the hands of a self-proclaimed brother of Jesus Christ. Hong and his forces knew they couldn't stay in Guangxi for long. The Qing were regrouping and time was against them. So, in September 1851, the Taipings began their legendary march north, following the Xiang River into Hunan province. City after city fell to their relentless advance. Changsha was besieged, Yuezhou occupied, and Wuchang captured by December 1852. The once obscure movement had now reached the Yangtze River, China's lifeline. At this moment, the Taiping leadership made a fateful decision: to march east toward the heart of the empire. Allies in the shadows? During this period, whispers of a shadowy alliance began to circulate. The triads, the secret criminal networks embedded across South China, had long dreamed of toppling the Qing. Could they see the Taiping movement as their golden opportunity? The Taiping hierarchy, whether consciously or not, adopted titles and structures that mirrored those of the triads, making them a natural magnet for disaffected groups looking to rise against the government. In 1852, Qing forces captured one rebel, Hong Dequan, who claimed to be a co-sovereign of the Taiping kingdom under Hong Xiuquan himself. Whether true or false, this story only added to the movement's mystique. But alliances built on convenience rarely last. When the Taipings finally took Nanjing in 1853, their relationship with the triads began to fray. The revolution was growing larger than anyone had anticipated, and with every victory Hong Xiuquan moved further from the secret societies and deeper into his vision of a divine empire. A kingdom born in blood. The Taipings had started as persecuted outcasts, as a small band of rebels in the mountains of Guangxi. But now they commanded armies, seized cities, and threatened the very existence of the Qing Dynasty. What began as a spiritual awakening had become one of the most devastating wars in human history. And the battle for China had only just begun. The fall of heaven, the Taiping kingdom's glory and betrayal. The city of Nanjing burned. The streets ran red with blood. On March 19, 1853, the Taiping army stormed into the great city, dealing the Qing Dynasty a devastating blow. Hong Xiuquan renamed it Tianjin, the heavenly capital, the seat of his divine empire. But for the Manchus who lived there, Tianjin became a place of slaughter. To the Taipings, the ruling Manchu elite were not just enemies, they were demons in human form. The rebels executed all the Manchu men they could find, then herded the women outside the city walls and set them ablaze. It was a brutal warning to the Qing. The heavenly kingdom was here and it would show no mercy. The kingdom expands and cracks. With Tianjin secured, the Taiping forces launched two ambitious military campaigns. The northern expedition aimed to strike at the heart of Qing power, Beijing itself. But it failed disastrously. The Qing court, still reeling from the fall of Nanjing, managed to rally its forces and crush the advance. The Western expedition, however, saw some success, pushing into the vast southern provinces. Yet, the rebellion's momentum was already faltering. The reason? Its own leader. By 1853, Hong Xiuquan had all but disappeared from active rule. He withdrew into his palace in Tianjin, issuing proclamations but rarely leading. He lived in lavish isolation, surrounded by a harem of women, convinced that his heavenly mission was secure. But outside the palace walls, tensions simmered. Yang Xiuqing, the ambitious general who had long claimed to speak as God, began consolidating power. He challenged Hong's decisions, questioned his retreat from governance, and built a network of spies to strengthen his own position. In 1856, it all came to a head. Hong, fearing Yang's influence, gave the order. The Tianjin incident erupted. Yang and his loyal followers were slaughtered by generals Wei Changhui and Qin Rigong in a night of blood and treachery. But the killing didn't stop there. Shi Dakai, one of the rebellion's most brilliant commanders, was horrified by the violence. When he objected, Wei and Qin murdered his family in retaliation. Shi, sensing his own fate, fled Tianjin, taking his forces west to Xiuquan. Then, in a final act of paranoia and power consolidation, Hong Xiuquan turned on Wei Changhui and Qin Rigong, the very men who had carried out the purge. Fearing their ambition, he had them executed as well. The heavenly kingdom was now leaderless, fractured, and weakened. A kingdom in decline. With Hong Xiuquan hidden in his palace, the remaining Taiping leaders struggled to win over allies. They attempted to negotiate with European powers, hoping for an alliance against the Qing. But Britain and France, wary of the rebellion's radical policies, remained officially neutral, though some foreign officers secretly joined Qing forces. Within China, resentment grew. The traditionalist rural class rejected the Taiping movement, disturbed by its destruction of Confucian culture and its strict rules, including the separation of men and women, even within marriage. The wealthy landowning elite had even more reason to oppose them. The Taiping reforms threatened to strip them of their power. Meanwhile, the Qing Dynasty had found a new champion, Zheng Guofan. A scholar-turned-general, Zheng assembled an army unlike any before, the Xiang army, made up of local militias rather than imperial troops. These forces, driven by regional loyalty and Confucian discipline, became the deadliest weapon in the Qing's arsenal. By 1856, the Xiang army had retaken Wuchang. By 1858, they crushed the Taipings in Jiangxi. A final resurgence? Just when the rebellion seemed on the verge of collapse, a new figure arrived, Hong Ringgong, Hong Xiuquan's cousin. Hong Ringgong was no ordinary leader. Unlike his cousin, he was a strategist, a visionary. In 1859, he arrived in Nanjing and quickly took control of the crumbling administration. He devised an ambitious plan to expand the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom across China. And in 1860, the Taiping struck back. They broke the Qing siege of Nanjing, pushing the imperial forces back after 7 years of encirclement. Then they surged into the wealthiest parts of the Qing Empire, Jiangsu and Zhejiang. City after city fell. Hangzhou March 19. Changzhou May 26. Suzhou June 2. The Heavenly Kingdom, battered but still standing, had won a new lease on life. But while the Taiping forces fought in the east, Zheng Guofan and the Xiang army were marching down the Yangtze River, tightening the noose. The final battle was approaching. The war for China's future. The Taiping Rebellion was no longer just a struggle between rebels and empire. It had become a war of ideologies, of faith, of survival. Would Hong Rengen's leadership be enough to restore the Heavenly Kingdom? Would Zheng Guofan's army deliver the final blow? The answer was coming. And China would never be the same. The fall of the Heavenly Kingdom, the Taiping Rebellion's final days. The dream of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was dying. Its armies, once numbering in the millions, were in retreat. Its leaders were divided. And the Qing Dynasty, battered but unbroken, had found its ultimate weapon, the ever-victorious army. The final chapter of China's deadliest civil war had begun. 1861. A desperate gamble for Shanghai. With Nanjing under siege, the Taiping leaders knew they needed a miracle. Their answer? Shanghai, the foreign-controlled trade hub teeming with wealth, supplies, and strategic importance. In June 1861, the Taiping army launched a full-scale offensive on Shanghai, hoping to deliver a knockout blow to Qing rule in the east. But standing in their way was an unusual opponent, an army of European-trained Qing soldiers, commanded by Frederick Townsend Ward, an American mercenary. The battle raged for 15 months, but the Taipings failed to break through. Ward's forces, soon to be named the ever-victorious army, proved devastatingly effective. With modern weaponry, superior training, and Western battlefield tactics, they repelled the Taiping attacks again and again. And then came a new commander, one who would seal the fate of the Heavenly Kingdom. His name was Charles George Gordon. A British officer with an unshakable sense of duty, Gordon transformed the ever-victorious army into a lethal force, striking deep into Taiping territory and crushing their remaining strongholds. The Taiping had lost their last great opportunity. 1862 to 1863, the walls close in. With Shanghai secure, the Qing turned their full attention to destroying the Taiping Rebellion once and for all. The Xiong army led by Zheng Guofan was gaining ground. In 1861 the city of Anqing fell, a devastating loss for the rebels, thanks in part to a Royal Navy blockade. By early 1862, the Taiping forces launched one last desperate eastern expedition, capturing Ningbo in December and Hangzhou at the end of the year. But it was a fleeting victory. The ever-victorious army struck back. Ningbo was retaken on May 10, 1862. Taiping strongholds along the Yangtze River fell one by one. The rebellion's territory was shrinking. Its armies were starving. And then in 1863, one of the last great Taiping generals, Xiuquan, surrendered to Qing forces near Chengdu, Xiuquan. His punishment? Death by slow slicing, a brutal execution meant to send a message to all remaining rebels. With Xiuquan, the rebellion's collapse was only a matter of time. 1864, the fall of Nanjing. By May 1864, the Xiong army had completely surrounded Nanjing. For over a decade, the city had stood as the heart of the Taiping movement, the heavenly capital. Now it was on the brink of annihilation. Hong Xiuquan, once the charismatic visionary of the rebellion, had become a recluse, issuing religious proclamations, convinced that God would protect the city. But no divine intervention came. The city's food supplies dwindled. Famine set in. The once mighty Taiping army was outnumbered, outgunned, and starving. And then Hong Xiuquan fell ill. Some say he suffered from food poisoning after eating wild vegetables. Others suspect suicide. On June 1, 1864, the Heavenly King died. 3 weeks later, on July 19, 1864, the Qing forces stormed Nanjing. The final battle was a massacre. Street by street, the Qing army butchered the remaining Taiping defenders. The city, once a symbol of rebellion, was reduced to ashes. Hong Xiuquan's son, Hong Tianguifu, briefly took over as leader. But he was only 15 years old, inexperienced and powerless. He fled, only to be captured and executed shortly afterward. And as for Hong Xiuquan's body? Zheng Guofan ordered it exhumed, desecrated, and dismembered. Its ashes were fired from a cannon, ensuring that nothing of the Heavenly King remained. The Taiping dream was over. 1865 to 1866, the last embers die. Though Nanjing had fallen, small bands of Taiping fighters refused to surrender. They retreated into the mountains of Jiangxi, Zhejiang, Fujian, and Guangdong, hoping to regroup. But the Qing had learned from their past failures. Zheng Guofan, Zhuo Zongtong, and Li Hongzhang led relentless search-and-destroy campaigns, hunting down the last rebels. By October 25, 1864, Hong Tianguifu was captured and executed. By January 29, 1866, one of the last Taiping generals, Wang Haiyang, was defeated. The war was finally over. The cost of rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion was one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. Between 20 to 30 million people perished, more than in World War I. Entire cities were wiped from the map. The Chinese countryside was scarred by famine, disease, and mass executions. Yet the war left behind a transformed China. The Qing Dynasty, though victorious, was irreversibly weakened. The rise of regional armies like the Xiong army set the stage for future warlords. European influence in China deepened, as the Qing relied on foreign assistance to survive. And the ideas of the Taiping, their radical visions of equality, reform, and rebellion, never truly died. They would inspire future revolutionaries, from the Boxers to Sun Yat-sen, and even the communist movement that would eventually topple the Qing Dynasty in 1912. The Heavenly Kingdom was gone. But its legacy endured. The aftermath of the Taiping Rebellion, China and beyond. Though Nanjing fell in 1864, the war was not yet over. Across southern China, hundreds of thousands of Taiping soldiers, leaderless but determined, refused to surrender. Even after the death of Hong Xiuquan, some continued to fight for nearly a decade, prolonging the chaos that had already devastated China. And beyond China's borders, the ripples of the rebellion would be felt for years to come. 1864 to 1871, the last Taiping holdouts. Following the destruction of the Heavenly Kingdom, remnants of the Taiping army scattered. Some fled into remote regions, forming guerrilla bands that waged a prolonged resistance against Qing forces. Hundreds of thousands of Taiping troops still fought, especially in Jiangxi and Fujian. More than 250,000 rebels held out in the borderlands, carrying on an insurgency. Qing forces pursued them relentlessly, using the same brutal tactics that had won them Nanjing. By August 1871, the last major Taiping army, commanded by Li Fuzhong, was completely annihilated in the border regions of Hunan, Guizhou, and Guangxi. The Heavenly Kingdom was no more. But the war's destruction had destabilized the entire region, creating power vacuums that gave rise to warlords, bandits, and foreign conflicts.